Hey everyone, Sparrow here. If you haven't guessed already, and if it's not obvious from the title of our video and the big blue sign in the middle of our plant habitat, we are building for the prairie dogs today. They will be the first species in our zoo and the animal that gets to greet guests as they head through the ticket gates into the zoo proper. Now, the reason why I'm not starting on the enclosure first is because I had this idea and I wanted to make sure it would work first before putting work into everywhere else. I'm hollowing out the ground in this corner to see if I can fit a path going down to create an underground burrow experience for guests. This building will feature the burrow cam on a big screen as well as some other educational resources related to our prairie dogs. Now, as always, I'm struggling with the paths to get them just the way I'd like, but if you too struggle with paths, I have found that building from the top down is easier than from the bottom up. Just lines up better in my experience. If you can't get things to align, make sure to press the Control or Command key to isolate that piece of path. Here I'm also using the Shift key to move the piece of path up and down. This took a few tries because I'm picky and wanted the path at the bottom all at the same level, but we got there in the end. Then we're going to go in with our concrete walls to mark out the building, making sure to double them up. This is so that the outside walls can be one color and the inside walls can be another. I'm not sure why I struggled with this little building so much. Maybe it's because I started with grid pieces and then added off-grid pieces, but ended up moving a bunch of the walls later anyway. Maybe I should have just used the panels from the start for better flexibility. I don't know. When working with panels, especially if they overlap, I try to line them up very closely, but so they're not totally exact. This is to get rid of the flickering effect you'll see, or Z fighting, that materials have when they are right over top of each other. By moving one layer a pixel or two, we can get rid of that effect, and it's less annoying later when touring the zoo or doing cinematics. You can see me doing a lot of that with this building, because concrete is especially bad for Z fighting. As mentioned before, we're going to adjust the walls and also adjust the groups because I didn't do a great job of organizing those in the beginning. One thing I've learned as a designer is that organizing layers makes your life much easier, but even though I know how to do that well in Photoshop, apparently that skill did not translate very well to planetzooo. So we're just going to spend some extra time making sure that all of that is nice and organized. We're going to jump over to the walled off construction zone to create some custom rock walls for the habitat barriers. Yes, more custom rock walls. This time we're using the smallest European rustic stone panel as the base with a painted temple support beam as the column. We'll also add a limestone base to ground it and then play around with recoloring the pieces. I try to find the undertone first using the hue slider on the side, so in this case orange, and then hop around the color picker to find lighter and darker shades that match. I really struggle with finding nice browns specifically, not sure why, it's just always been like this. Orange is my least favorite color, so that could be a potential reason. We will top the wall off with some faux aquatic rocks to give some nice texture, do some more recoloring. See, I told you it was a struggle. And then we'll copy it over to make a windowed version for our animal viewpoints. I should also mention that the guest-facing side is the rustic stone, but the back side is plain concrete. This is mostly because a lot of the photos I saw online featured prairie dog habitats that were walled in with concrete. There weren't too many inspiration photos though. I guess not a lot of zoos keep prairie dogs, or maybe I'm just really suck at Googling this week, but we'll see. A few did have these domes within the habitat where guests could walk underneath the enclosure and then stick their heads in, maybe come face to face with a prairie dog. I did consider doing that here, but with the game mechanics, assumed it would just be way too difficult to pull off. Once those metal beams and New World fence posts lining our glass are in, we'll be moving our newly created walls to the border of the habitat. These walls fit surprisingly well around the edge. Sometimes it feels like I have to push and pull for a long time before things finally line up the way I want them to, but these walls, yeah, it was just a breeze. A longer viewing gallery right in front where guests come into the zoo, and there will be another smaller one down the path to the left. Taking the time to line everything up nicely with each section. Before our tour, we'll also add some rock weathering decals on the concrete within the habitat and grunge up the windows a bit, maybe from the prairie dogs kicking up dirt in their enclosure or from people putting their grubby fingers on glass, just something to add a little more realism to the build. shifting the building over slightly so that the last piece of fence isn't cut off in a weird way, and we'll use the temple support beam on the end as our filler for the corner of the building. Since it's 2 layers of walls, the outside walls don't quite touch in the corners and need a column or something in between, but it adds a nice detail. Our keeper gate is going into the front of the building, setting up some null barriers around the edge of the created barriers so we can get the prairie dogs in here as soon as possible. I'm very excited to have them in this zoo. I always thought prairie dogs were super cute as a kid, and I still think they're pretty adorable to this day. Where I live, they have unfortunately become quite accustomed to humans, and a lot of people feed them, so they will come right up to you if you're eating outdoors, hoping you'll throw them some scraps. I try not to, but I've definitely seen one come right up and steal food when no one was looking. Hopping back to the burrow, the interior walls will be all black to provide a darker underground experience. They could have been a deep brown, but well, you already know my opinion on shades of brown. This little gap will be filled in with one of the classical columns so that we can get a super dark finish all the way around. We have 3 prairie dogs in the enclosure now, 1 male and 2 females. I'll be renaming them in a bit, but first, terrain painting. I initially wanted to stick with the requirements each animal has, even though this is a sandbox build, to stay true to the mechanics of the game. But we're already breaking a lot of other rules here, such as using a bunch of building pieces in ways they are probably not initially designed for, and the green for this terrain wasn't working for me in the way I had imagined this prairie habitat looking, so that's one more rule broken. Oh well. Likewise, I didn't love how orange the grassland rocks were, so the backdrop of this habitat will be taiga rock, as everywhere else in the zoo so far. The plan is to cover the entire side of the building behind this habitat with a stone wall. I could have done something similar to our rock garden in the front with layered rocks, but those would stick into the wall a lot more than these big slabs, so I went for the larger rocks this time. We'll ground them with more stones all around and eventually build the burrow into the side of this rocky terrain. Will also be super useful in covering up that gap that was left because of the path going down into the burrow, but need to make sure the rocks aren't clipping through the wall on the other side. I really wish I had more tips for rock placement, but I honestly just pick a rock and spam it where I think it looks good. You'll see me place them down, decide I don't actually like them, and then delete them throughout this video. And in the center here, some more raised rocky terrain for the prairie dogs to stand on and keep a lookout for predators. The faux rocks, I believe it's number 7 and 9, I like to sink into the terrain so it looks like smaller rock deposits all around the larger boulders. Having some issues recoloring these ones too, just trouble with color all around today apparently. I think it was after I built this habitat that someone told me they prefer the temple rubble pieces from the South America pack to the faux rocks for creating this effect, so I may have to go back and swap them out. I'm not entirely happy with the look of these stones. I do end up creating my own arrangement of smaller stones later to add more variety to this habitat, so I will definitely have to try out the temple pieces. Here I was messing around with the rock placement in the back so that the prairie dogs could climb up to various lookout points and display some of their natural behaviors. I did manage to get 2 sizable areas for them to climb up to, but unfortunately I just couldn't get the rocks over the burrow to work the way I wanted them to. For planting up the habitat, I decided on a few of the grasses, mostly different types of buffalo grass and the dry bluestem grass, as well as saltwort, and I think that might be it. You might see me add a hawthorn bush and some goldenrod, but I didn't think it worked. It didn't fit the rocky, low-growing version of the habitat that I had in my head, so I ended up deleting them. Just playing around with a ton of different types of grasses, sinking them into the terrain so there's variation between the lengths. I don't like to leave the patches of terrain painted grass on their own because the texture just doesn't do it for me. Like, it needs a little extra something. A short intermission for a planter outside of the habitat. There was a large piece of grass between the barrier and the guest path, so instead of moving the barriers, I just decided to add this little feature here, using this classic stone trim as we did around the logo on the front of the entrance building. Back in the burrow, we're going to add our burrow cam screen and then fill in the gaps between the path and the walls with more rocks, so guests can feel like they are actually underground with the prairie dogs in the enclosure. As you can tell, there is really no linear process to this. I wish I was more streamlined because it would make videos so much easier to do, but I just need variety, and sometimes I have no ideas for a section, go work on another, and then come back fresh to the previous one and get it all finished. It's all just part of the creative process, I guess. Taking out one of the walls here to reveal the ground behind it, this will be a window, so to speak, into the world of the prairie dogs, so that guests can learn about their burrows and digging habits and such. I wanted this building to not only house the one burrow cam screen, but also to serve as an educational resource for the visitors to the zoo. I always like seeing the behind the scenes of a habitat, or when there's like a cutaway that shows you the layers of rock or soil in an enclosure, or something about the specific plants that are related to that biome. I don't know, I love learning, so these little things just always speak to me. I have some additional stuff that I'm very excited to show you in the tour. We're just putting a layer of glass over our upside down flower beds. That's how I got that soil texture, so guests can't disturb the display, and then some of the marquee beams all the way around to set the glass into the concrete. In the main prairie dog building, I will be adding a small gate so the animals can get into the indoor part of their enclosure. Built the small rectangle and set it down next to one of the dogs using the traversable area filter to see when it was large enough for the prairie dog to fit through. I think the hitbox size is equal to the length of the animal, but don't quote me on that. I usually just measure like this so I can be sure that my enclosure will work how I want it to, because there's nothing worse than building a beautiful interior and then having to retrofit it because the animals can't actually use it. I'm building up the doorway using the marquee beams on the inside and the metal beams on the outside, and then we'll line the inside with the primitive rectangles, which I have been sleeping on apparently because they are so useful, and this build was the first time I used them. Like, I have used them in the past as placeholders to help measure things out, but never as part of a building. This will be the last thing we look at more in depth as part of the speed build, because this took about 10 hours, and if I showed everything that would be way too long of a video. So instead, we'll do a quick montage of some of the additional details that went into this enclosure, like these faux trees and stalactites added to the rock background to create some texture, branches all over the habitat to provide some more interest and fill out spaces that were feeling too empty, adding the water and food areas for the animals, making sure to hide them so they don't stick out too much, just raising the terrain over the feeding platform. Enrichment items like the tunnel and tennis ball, also the herb scent markers to entice the prairie dogs to go up onto the rocks. Replanted the entire habitat because I decided I didn't like the way it looked the first time around. Some more dirt spilling out of our planter for added detail. Created nesting boxes for the prairie dogs. They can't actually use them, but it's a nice detail to have in the backstage area. Made some signage using Ricey's lettering off of the workshop for our burrow experience. Some custom prairie dog footprints because the only thing available to us is the cat paw print. Staged the backstage area to look like someone was prepping food for our animals. Added ceilings and interior lighting before putting a roof on. And then colored and recolored the roofs to fit them in nicely. Some more garden bed planting in front of the burrow building, and on the backstage building some variegated ivy to make it less boring, plus some lighting to finish it all off. And here we are. We're going to do this a little bit differently today. Normally I record my walkthrough first and then voice over it after, but we're just going to try to do everything all at once today. See how it goes. So this is our ticket gate entrance, which we built in episode 2. Some new additions to this section are these rock walls to the side to hide the view of the animals from anyone who hasn't paid to enter the zoo yet. And then we have our little construction zone on the side. We also have that same rock wall on the other side, a little seating area, and then the greenhouse that we built last episode in the background. So let's head on in and see our prairie dogs. We're gonna take either the stairs or the ramps on the side, whatever you prefer, and we immediately see our prairie dog enclosure here. So we're gonna walk right up to this first viewing gallery at the front. Oh, I can hear them, but I can't see them. There we go. Hello, all 3. I did end up renaming them because of the sounds they make. They're called prairie dogs. And so I looked up, hello, let me click you. Nope. Okay, there we go. I looked up the top 10 male and female dog names in, I think it was a state's statistic, but they are named after the top 10 dog names. So we have Luna is one of our females, Bella is our other female, and Charlie is our male. Oh, look, they just got fed that hidden feeding platform. You can just see their food on top of the ground instead. And if you lower yourself to child height, you get to see through the viewing window here. A little bit of Zed fighting on those decals that I'll have to fix. I'm very happy with the back rock wall. The way it turned out, it kind of blends into the mountains in the background, which was completely unintentional, but that worked out really nicely. Let's head over to our underground burrow experience. I'm just gonna turn out the lights so that we get the full underground experience. Not dark enough? Not quite. There we go. Alright. So we have the burrow on the front. And then we're going to take a walk in here. On the left side here is that sign you saw me making in the montage. Come see us in our burrow. And then on the other side are the prairie dog paw prints that I was also making in the montage. So that's just a combination of the cat paw print, some full stops, and some commas. Down here, we have pot lights along the side, just for safety reasons, so you can actually see where you're going. And then some educational signage off of the workshop by the Amazing Lion, just recolored to fit the branding colors. And we have some specimens of plants you might find in prairie dog habitats. So we have the big blue stem grass, dry version and regular version of saltwort, and the buffalo grass. Nicely lit up from within, which is why I wanted to show it at night. And then we have the dirt panel here, talking about the soil and the digging habits of prairie dogs. And then our burrow cam on the side here with a little seating area. Very happy with how this turned out. I'm glad I started with it and made sure that I could actually do it before building everything else though. We're gonna head back outside and we're going to check out the education boards. So here we are. These are custom made as well. We have the True North logo in the side and then a picture of our prairie dogs. Aw, hello, come to play. Anyway, back to the education board. So we have the common name, the Latin name, a short description, and then that row of circles there, that's the conservation status. So the one that's filled in and bright is the one that they're at, I believe their least concern. And then all of the other ones are grayed out. So you'll see those change on various education boards around the zoo. The icons below are the habitat, their diet, and then their social structure, as well as a map of where you can find them in the world, and a fun fact in the Did You Know box. Alright, let's head around to the other viewing area to see where they enter their indoor part of the enclosure. Right through that doorway. I'm gonna turn the lights back on, so eyes. There we go. Okay. Looks like they're headed inside, so we're also going to head inside to see what they're up to in there. Just through this little doorway here. And we are in the indoor part. So they have a little tunnel to entice them to come in here, and the nesting boxes that they can't use, unfortunately, but should be because they're such a small animal. I'm not sure why their hitbox is so massive. Just super simple. They should all fit in here in the winter too if necessary, so. That doorway back there is going to eventually lead to this building behind this enclosure, which I will keep a secret for now. And then this is our backstage area. We have some custom cabinets and a little prep table here that someone has been prepping fruits and veggies on for our lovely prairie dogs. this sink back here has some potatoes in it, but it's made out of the aluminum panels, some tiles, the faucet, and then the actual sink portion is the aircon vents, and then there's just a drain kind of sunk in down there. We're gonna head into the enclosure for up close and personal view of our prairie dogs. This is what I was talking about earlier, so you can see on the ground a little bit of the green grass terrain paint, but it just doesn't look realistic enough for me, so I like to use the buffalo grass and just kind of make it stick out a little bit. And then when the prairie dog walks through it, it kind of looks like it's prowling through the grass. They can get up onto those rocks there. I believe there's a scent marker in there. Yeah. So that they will want to go up there. Oh, my cat does not like their squeaking. They actually have a pretty nice view of the zoo from here too. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for joining me on this tour. Here is where we started off our build today, and this is where we ended up. Thank you for hanging out. Remember to comment, like, and subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time. Bye.